let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Have you ever genuinely forgiven someone?
Oh, that's a big one right out of the gate.
Right. But I mean, really forgiven them. Like, you sat down, you did all the heavy lifting in your head.
The conscious work.
Exactly. You said the words out loud. You meant it cognitively. You basically drew this line in the sand and decided, I am releasing this debt.
Yeah, you made the choice.
But then that person walks into the room.
Or their name pops up on your phone.
Yes. Their name lights up on your screen. And instantly, before you even think, you get this tight physical knot right in the pit of your stomach.
Your heart rate spikes.
Your chest gets super heavy, your breath gets shallow, and you have this massive, just incredibly frustrating disconnect.
Between your brain and your body.
Exactly. Between the conscious decision your brain just made and the physiological alarm bells your body is practically screaming at you.
It's completely disorienting.
It really is. And if you are listening to this right now and you're nodding along, or maybe you're just feeling completely exposed,
Which is fair.
you are not alone. That exact tension, that gap between a forgiving mind and a deeply distrusting body, that is exactly what we are exploring today.
It is such a profound friction, and honestly, it leaves so many people feeling like they are somehow failing at forgiveness, like they're doing it wrong.
Right. And to figure out why that happens, we are jumping into a deep dive today. We've got a fascinating stack of sources to go through.
We really do.
These materials tackle this highly specific intersection of relationship repair, deep trauma, and emotional healing.
The sources include some transcripts and excerpts. They're titled Beyond Forgiveness, Forgiving Immediately and Rebuilding Trust Over Time, and The Divine Provision.
And the mission here, our overarching goal for this deep dive, is to move way past that cliche, honestly, kind of dismissive advice to just forgive and forget.
Because that advice rarely actually works in the real world.
It doesn't. We are unpacking the long-term, gritty reality of managing these lingering emotional impacts and triggers long after an apology has supposedly, settled the score.
And before we really get into the mechanics of all that, we should probably establish the nature of the frameworks used in these original sources.
Good point.
Because the original speakers lean pretty heavily on faith-based paradigms.
Right. They use biblical analogies.
Yeah, things like the Lord's Prayer or the ancient narrative of Cain and Abel. And they use these concepts of divine grace to explain human behavioral patterns.
And just to be completely clear with you listening, we are impartially examining these frameworks today. We're looking at them as the philosophical and psychological lenses that the original authors used to make sense of trauma.
Exactly. We are extracting the underlying human truths about how the mind processes pain. We aren't endorsing any specific religious viewpoint or taking any sides.
We're just looking at the tools they use to survive the unimaginable.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. If society expects a wiped slate, water under the bridge, but our actual lived experience is this horrible knot in the stomach, what is actually happening physiologically?
Well, society pushes this forgive and forget narrative really hard. It suggests that once you cancel a debt, closeness is just automatically restored.
Like flipping a switch.
Right. But the foundational argument across all these materials is that forgiveness alone does not manufacture closeness.
It doesn't create safety.
Not at all. And it definitely doesn't guarantee connection.
So why do we feel that lingering dread around someone we've theoretically pardoned?
What's fascinating here is that the answer these analyses offer is incredibly validating. Your body is simply too smart to be tricked by a cognitive decision.
Too smart. I love that phrasing.
It's true. Your nervous system is this highly evolved, deeply intelligent threat detection mechanism.
Its job is to keep you alive.
Exactly. Its primary objective is survival, not social politeness, not making things unawkward at Thanksgiving.
Right.
From a purely biological standpoint, it makes zero sense for a smart biological system to offer vulnerability or access to an entity that has already proven it might exploit those resources.
Wow. That completely reorients the whole concept of the stomach knot.
It takes the shame out of it.
It really does, because we are so conditioned to view that physical hesitation as a moral failure.
Oh, absolutely.
You sit there and think, I must be holding a grudge. I'm harboring bitterness. I haven't really forgiven them.
I'm a bad person.
Yes. But this framework suggests your body is actually functioning perfectly.
It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is registering a major discrepancy between the mental concept of forgiveness and the physical reality of your environment.
Okay, so we need to define what makes an environment or a person unsafe in the aftermath of a betrayal. Because I think people picture, like, a movie villain.
Right, someone twirling a mustache.
Mm.
But it's rarely that overt. The sources are very specific here. Unsafe behavior often looks like a subtle refusal to participate in the repair.
What does that look like practically?
Well, if someone is not curious about how their actions impacted you, if they get defensive the second you try to express your pain.
Oh, the defensiveness is a big one.
Huge. Or if they refuse to validate the damage they caused, even if that damage was entirely unintentional.
The I didn't mean to, so you shouldn't be mad defense.
Exactly. If they do that, your nervous system logs them as a continued threat.
Because they aren't safe to be vulnerable with.
Right. So the mental choice of canceling a debt is an entirely separate thing from the physiological reality of the relationship.
So true forgiveness, at least as it's outlined in these sources, requires acknowledging that a wrong actually occurred in the first place.
You can't forgive something you pretend didn't happen.
Exactly. Something was taken. Your peace, your trust, your time, there's a tangible wound there.
And you can make the intentional, cognitive choice to cancel that debt.
You can say, I am not going to spend my emotional energy trying to force you to pay me back.
Largely because you probably lack the capacity to do so anyway.
Right. And that is a release of resentment. It's letting go of the demand for payback.
But, and this is the crucial part, releasing resentment does not rewrite the nervous system's threat protocols.
It doesn't mean you're suddenly best friends again.
Think about it financially. Canceling a financial debt for someone who defaulted doesn't mean you immediately turn around and sign a new mortgage with them.
That would be terrible financial advice.
Terrible. And it's terrible relational advice, too. The sources emphasize that intimacy and trust require the other person to actively participate in the repair process.
Whereas forgiveness doesn't.
Right. Forgiveness is a solitary act. You can forgive someone internally without ever speaking a single word to them again for the rest of your life.
But closeness is an architectural endeavor.
That's a great way to put it. It requires building materials from both parties.
How does this solitary nature of forgiveness complicate things when you're dealing with a highly toxic environment? Because I feel like toxic individuals often weaponize this exact concept.
Oh, they absolutely weaponize it. They use it to bypass accountability entirely.
Right. They use it as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
The texts actually address this manipulation directly. A narcissistic parent or a really toxic partner might look at you and say, well, if you really loved me, you would forgive me and let this go.
Or, you're punishing me by setting this boundary.
Yes. They are deliberately conflating forgiveness with access.
That is such a critical distinction. Forgiveness versus access.
The argument the authors make here is that love and forgiveness do not preclude accountability.
You can have both.
You must have both. You can genuinely forgive someone while simultaneously recognizing that you cannot abandon your own psychological well-being just to share physical space with them.
I really hope someone listening just heard that. If you have been carrying this massive guilt because you've extended forgiveness, but you still have absolutely zero desire to go grab a coffee with the person who betrayed you.
This framework gives you permission to put that guilt down right now.
Yes. The lack of desire to connect is not a failure of your forgiveness. It is the natural, logical consequence of their betrayal.
The pain and the disconnection don't just vanish into thin air because you opted out of taking revenge.
So this profound separation between the internal release of a grudge and the external reality of the relationship dynamics, it leads us directly into the concept of timelines.
The two timelines.
Right. The sources are emphatic about this. There are two distinct timelines operating simultaneously when we try to overcome a betrayal.
The distinction they draw is that forgiveness is immediate, but trust takes time.
Those tracks operate at vastly different speeds.
Completely different. Let's look at the first track, the immediacy of forgiveness. A major mental hurdle for anyone who has been wronged is the fear that extending forgiveness is basically the same thing as condoning the behavior.
It's a protective hesitation. You're afraid that by forgiving, you are somehow validating your own mistreatment.
You feel like you're saying what you did was okay.
Exactly. But the counter-argument provided in the material is that forgiveness is not about affirming the offense. It has nothing to do with saying it was okay.
It's about releasing the victim from the bondage of the end.
Setting yourself free from the sheer exhaustion of demanding a repayment that, let's face it, is probably never going to come.
Because it is an internal recalibration, it can theoretically happen in an instant.
You can decide today, in a split second, to stop demanding payback.
Right. That's the first track. But the second track operates on an entirely different mechanism.
The trust track.
When do you start trusting a person again? The answer provided in these transcripts is pretty stark. You do not trust them again until they actually become trustworthy.
And trustworthiness is not a switch you can just flip.
No, it requires long-term observation. You have to watch them over time.
The phrasing they use is so good. They say forgiveness does not equal fellowship.
You can be in a state of forgiveness without being in a state of fellowship.
Which brings up a really intense philosophical tension regarding fairness. Because if we are being analytical about this, forgiveness, by its very nature, is profoundly unfair.
It really is.
It completely violates our intrinsic sense of justice.
Because the natural transactional response to pain is to inflict proportional pain. You hurt me, I hurt you back.
Exactly. To explain the psychological utility of choosing the unfair path, the original speakers rely heavily on the theological concept of grace.
Right, and in their framework, strict transactional fairness would mean every single human receives exactly the punishment their actions dictate.
Eye for an eye.
Exactly. The concept of divine grace introduces an interruption to that transaction. It's an unearned pardon.
And when applied to human psychology, the speaker is suggesting that when you forgive, you are basically offering an unearned grace to someone else.
You are stepping completely outside the rigid bounds of fairness to perform an act that halts the cycle of retaliation.
You aren't doing it to balance the cosmic scales.
Not at all.
You are doing it to stop the toxicity from circulating within your own system.
But while that grace can be extended instantly, the rebuilding of trust is agonizingly slow.
So slow. And the imagery they use to describe this second track is so visceral.
The buckets and the spoons.
Yes. The sources state that trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. Or they say it's lost by the bucketful, but rebuilt by the spoonful.
Consider the physics of that metaphor for a second. When a bucket of water is overturned, the displacement is instantaneous. It's chaotic. It's a mess.
The trust is just eradicated in a single moment of betrayal.
Gone. So the repair process involves the offender taking a tiny little spoon and attempting to refill that massive bucket.
Drop by drop.
It is an excruciatingly slow, repetitive, and honestly humbling process for the person holding the spoon.
And it also requires massive patience from the person watching them use the spoon.
Which means the injured party is entirely justified in setting a verbal boundary while that's happening.
The texts explicitly validate saying the words out loud, looking at the person and saying, I forgive you, but I do not trust you.
It feels like it breaks a social taboo to actually speak those words.
It really does. We are so conditioned to soften our boundaries just to make other people comfortable.
But saying, I forgive you, but I don't trust you, establishes reality. It communicates, listen, I have released the demand for revenge, but the infrastructure of our relationship has been destroyed.
We are starting from zero.
And you have to build it back. If the offender is genuinely interested in repair, they have to accept the reality of the spoonful.
They can't get mad that it's taking so long.
No. They must understand that their words must perfectly align with their actions over a very extended duration.
As the notes point out, trust is built when actions prove the words over and over again.
So we have established that the body is intelligent in its distrust and that trust is a slow, structural rebuild.
But that leads to a huge question. How do we actually address the raw, chaotic weight of the trauma itself?
The actual pain we carry.
Yes. And this brings us to a specific narrative within the source titled The Divine Provision.
This is such a powerful section.
It offers a truly fascinating architectural framework for processing severe emotional pain.
The narrative centers on a woman named Lisa. She is navigating the unwanted dissolution of a nearly 3-decade marriage.
30 years. That's a lifetime.
And the vulnerability in her account is crucial for understanding the depths of the framework she eventually adopts. She describes this moment of profound executive dysfunction caused by her grief.
This happens right before an appointment with a counselor named Jem, right?
Yes. She's sitting in her car right before going into the office. She's looking in the rearview mirror, trying to deduce the last time she washed her hair.
Because she genuinely can't remember.
She can't. She realizes she hasn't managed basic hygiene. Like she hasn't even put on deodorant.
And when you're in that state, logic just flies out the window. Her solution is to rummage around, find a peach air freshener in the center console.
And she just sprays herself with it.
It's a moment of dark humor, but it so perfectly illustrates the cognitive overload of trauma.
It really does. When your brain is utilizing every single one of its resources just to survive the emotional pain.
Just to keep breathing.
basic executive functions like showering just completely collapse.
So she walks into a clinical therapy setting smelling like peach cobbler, just completely fractured.
And the counselor, Jim, he asks her for an update on her condition. She articulates that she is in so much agony she doesn't even want to get out of bed.
And his clinical pivot in that moment is so jarring.
It really is. He looks at her and tells her that today is a good day to begin working on forgiveness.
Could you imagine? Her internal reaction is literally to wonder if he is intoxicated.
She thinks he's out of his mind.
And understandably so. When you are drowning in fresh agony, a directive to forgive the person holding your head underwater, it feels absurd. It feels deeply invalidating.
But he doesn't push this toxic positivity agenda. He doesn't say, just smile and let it go. He introduces a highly tactical exercise.
He hands her a massive stack of 3x5 index cards.
He instructs her to write down one specific factual detail per card, one thing that was done or said that caused her pain.
He forces her to break down this monolithic, crushing weight of her trauma into isolated, granular facts.
And as she fills them out, he has her physically arrange them across the floor of his office.
She is literally externalizing the internal chaos.
Exactly. And she notes that seeing the entire floor covered in these white cards produced a profound psychological shift for her.
She looked at the physical manifestation of her suffering and realized, oh, no wonder I feel this heavy.
Look at the sheer volume of what I have been carrying around in my body.
It instantly validates her exhaustion.
But then, once the trauma is externalized on the floor, the counselor provides the critical intervention.
This part is so moving.
He looks at the cards, then he looks at her and says, I believe you. What was done to you is terrible. It should never have happened. And if no other human ever says these words to you, I will say them. I'm so sorry.
The source notes that hearing I believe you and I am sorry from a third party caused something inside her to just soften.
Because she uncovered a massive psychological trap she had been caught in without even realizing it?
She was subconsciously waiting for the person who betrayed her to say those exact words.
She had tied her capacity to heal to the offender's willingness to repent.
And anchoring your recovery to the hypothetical future choices of the person who harmed you. That is a recipe for prolonged suffering.
If you wait for the offender to validate your pain before you allow yourself to heal, you are granting them the power to hurt you indefinitely.
Because they may never apologize.
They might not. They may lack the self-awareness to even comprehend what they actually did.
So the revelation here is that you do not fundamentally need the perpetrator to apologize.
What you need is for another human consciousness to bear witness to your reality.
You need someone, anyone, to look at the damage and confirm that it is real and that it is unjust.
And this realization introduces the core architectural concept of this specific framework. It's the separation of fact from impact.
Fact versus impact. This is huge.
The argument is that trauma is not a single entity. It is a binary structure.
There are two parts. Let's break those down. What is the fact?
The fact is the objective historical event. The words spoken, the betrayal enacted, the boundary crossed. It's what happened.
And the impact?
The impact is the ongoing collateral damage. How that event altered your trajectory, how it fractured your ability to trust, the physical anxiety you carry today.
So because trauma is two parts, the process of forgiveness must also be bifurcated. It has to be two parts.
Yes. And understanding this is a massive relief. It explains exactly why we feel stuck.
You can forgive the fact of what happened. You can decide to release the historical event itself.
But you still have to actively process, heal from, and eventually forgive the ongoing impact of that event.
To help her visualize this, the counselor introduces another tool, a stack of red felt squares.
He instructs her to address each index card individually. For the fact written on the card, she makes a cognitive declaration of forgiveness.
I forgive this fact.
Right. But then she places a red felt square over the card. The felt symbolizes a holding space for all the unresolved emotions attached to that fact.
And she states, whatever my feelings will not yet allow for, this will cover it.
Now, setting aside the specific theological language she uses in the source for that covering, the psychological utility of this mechanism is just brilliant.
It really is. It entirely removes the pressure to manufacture perfect emotional closure at the exact moment you make a cognitive decision.
It validates the reality of the disconnect. It allows you to say, my intellect is choosing to move forward, but my nervous system has not yet caught up.
And that's okay.
Exactly. It acts as an emotional pressure release valve.
It prevents that shame cycle we talked about earlier. The one that happens when someone thinks, I said I forgave them yesterday, but I'm still furious today, so I must be a liar.
By placing the felt over the card, she creates a tangible container for her unhealed emotions.
She is cooperating with the trajectory of healing without forcing an artificial emotional state.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that separation of fact and impact provides the perfect analytical lens for dissecting one of the most unpredictable elements of healing. Yes, triggers are the uncontrollable somatic echoes of trauma.
And the sources offer a radical, highly practical reframing of how they function, because triggers are notoriously inconvenient.
The material actually jokes about how we all wish we could just schedule our psychological breakdown.
Yes, you want to say, okay, I will process this profound betrayal on Tuesday evening. I'll be in a warm bath. I'll have a curated playlist going, maybe a candle.
But your nervous system doesn't consult your Google Calendar.
It really doesn't. A trigger hits you in the produce aisle of the grocery store.
Or when you smell a certain cologne.
Or when a specific song plays on the radio, and the intensity of the pain in that moment feels entirely fresh, like it just happened.
And the default internal narrative when a trigger occurs is self-condemnation.
I'm a forgiveness failure.
I'm still furious, I am still grieving, I haven't done the work properly.
That is such a common and destructive thought loop, but applying the fact versus impact framework completely dismantles it.
When a trigger hits, it is not the fact of the trauma undoing your cognitive decision to forgive.
It is the impact demanding to be processed.
The source material reframes these triggers not as indicators of failure, but as merciful leaks.
Merciful leaks. That completely shifts the perspective.
Think about the psychology of titration in trauma therapy. If the full, unmitigated impact of a severe betrayal hit your conscious mind and your central nervous system simultaneously,
All at once.
the psychological weight would be catastrophic. It would completely exceed your capacity to function.
It would crush you.
So the trigger is actually a highly sophisticated protective mechanism.
Your brain is slowly titrating the impact, letting it leak out drop by drop, only at the rate you possess the capacity to survive it.
A trigger is essentially a diagnostic light on your internal dashboard indicating, hey, you have acquired enough distance and stability to process this specific microfraction of the pain.
Recognizing triggers as a biological mercy rather than a moral failure, it alters the entire landscape of recovery.
It replaces self-loathing with self-compassion.
Which is huge. Furthermore, it establishes really rigid parameters for how the offender must behave if they are still present and attempting to rebuild that trust.
Let's analyze the offender's required response here, because this is where relationship repair either succeeds or permanently fails.
The source provides a highly relatable scenario. You are in the car with the person who betrayed you. You are driving past a specific location, maybe a restaurant or a hotel, that is deeply tied to the betrayal.
Trigger hits.
And your mood instantly plummets. It's written all over your face. What is the most destructive response the offender can offer in that exact moment?
The absolute most destructive response is impatience.
Rolling their eyes.
Saying things like, you should be over this by now, that happened months ago, or are we really going to ruin the whole evening over this again?
Dismissal and impatience instantly annihilate safety.
It signals to the victim's nervous system that their pain is an inconvenience.
And if the offender is serious about the spoonful reality of rebuilding trust, their response must be the exact inverse of dismissal.
They must lean into the trigger.
They have to validate the reality of the leak.
They need to say, it makes complete sense that driving past this place is painful for you. I recognize why you are feeling this way, and I am deeply sorry that my actions caused this.
They must exhibit genuine curiosity about the victim's internal state. Ask what is required to reestablish safety right then and there.
That is what it looks like to actively wield the spoon. It is the consistent, humble willingness to sit in the discomfort of the impact whenever it decides to leak out.
Now, we have been discussing deep, catastrophic relationship breaches up to this point, but the sources also pivot to address a completely different category of pain.
Right, the minor everyday offenses.
The ones that don't destroy our lives, but they constantly threaten our daily equilibrium.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We are moving from deep trauma recovery into what we might call daily emotional economics.
The texts offer a highly pragmatic mathematical model for managing these constant minor frictions.
One of the speakers breaks the concept of a single day down into its most basic unit, the minute.
We are each allotted exactly 1,440 minutes per day.
1,440 minutes. The economic scenario presented is this. You are going about your day, and someone, maybe a stranger in traffic, a passive-aggressive colleague, an irritable family member, they commit a minor offense.
They're rude, they cut you off, they make a snide comment in a meeting.
In doing so, they have stolen exactly 1 minute of your day.
1 minute.
The critical economic question the framework poses is, how are you going to spend the remaining 1,339 minutes?
And what do we usually do? The human tendency is toward rumination.
We take that one stolen minute and we voluntarily hand over the next 3 hours thinking of the perfect comeback we should have said.
Or we call our friends to complain about how deeply unfair the interaction was. We just spin and spin.
The source argues that allowing a minor offender to burn the remaining capital of your day is a profound misallocation of your limited time.
To emphasize the danger of this rumination, the text connects this daily frustration to a much older, darker psychological truth about anger.
They utilize the ancient biblical narrative of Cain and Abel to illustrate the life cycle of unattended resentment.
Again, looking at this strictly as a psychological archetype, the story of Cain and Abel functions as one of the oldest recorded examples of bitterness.
In the narrative, Cain perceives an injustice. His offering is rejected while his brother's is favored.
He experiences profound anger.
But before that anger manifests as violence, the text highlights a psychological warning he is given. He is told that sin is crouching at the door, that it desires to consume him, and that he must master it.
Crouching at the door. That is such a chilling personification of resentment.
It frames anger not as a static emotion that just sits quietly in the back of your mind, but as an active predatory force.
The framework suggests that harboring a desire for payback is equivalent to inviting a predator into your psychological ecosystem.
The speaker synthesizes this with a widely recognized metaphor. You've probably heard it. Unforgiveness is a poison you drink while hoping the other person dies.
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of causality.
Right. The person who cut you off in traffic is likely miles away, entirely oblivious to your existence, happily living in their own reality.
Meanwhile, the physiological stress of your anger,
Yeah.
your spiked cortisol, your elevated heart rate, it is exclusively degrading your own biology. You're poisoning yourself over a traffic slight.
So on a practical level, how do we operationalize this? How do we stop drinking the poison and protect our 1,440 minutes from these minor daily thefts?
The speaker introduces a tactic that is both humorous and highly effective. She calls it pre-forgiving the fools.
Pre-forgiving the fools. I love this. It is a strategy of preemptive emotional regulation.
The concept is to integrate the decision to forgive into your baseline cognitive state before you even encounter an offense.
She describes a morning routine where, before her feet even hit the floor, she consciously decides, I am going to pre-forgive the individuals who will inevitably annoy, disappoint, or frustrate me today.
Because someone will.
Oh, guaranteed. She illustrates the utility of this with a story about being in a coffee shop. We have all witnessed this exact scenario.
You are in line, the atmosphere is calm, it's a nice morning.
And suddenly, the person in front of you completely detonates because the barista frapped their latte incorrectly.
They escalate a minor inconvenience into a major confrontation. They just ruin the vibe of the entire room.
The speaker analyzes her historical reaction to that kind of secondary stress.
Yeah.
Previously, witnessing that unwarranted aggression would have completely hijacked her own nervous system.
She would have absorbed the tension. She would have judged the aggressor, gotten irritated herself, and carried that agitated energy into her next interaction.
But because she has installed this protocol of pre-forgiveness, her internal response is entirely insulated.
She looks at the individual having a meltdown over a beverage and thinks, you do you, boo.
You do you, boo. It is such a brilliant dismissive mantra.
It really translates to, you are the exact person I prepared for this morning.
You have laid down an offense in this environment, but I am under absolutely no obligation to pick it up and carry it.
It functions as an emotional deflector shield.
It's a boundary that dictates your inability to regulate your emotions does not require my physiological participation.
However, this heavy emphasis on boundaries and emotional shielding introduces a critical vulnerability in the healing process.
Right. If our primary objective becomes protecting our peace at all costs, how do we prevent our lives from becoming hermetically sealed?
How do we avoid the trap of extreme isolation? Because you can protect yourself from pain by just never leaving the house.
But that's not living. That is the pivotal tension we must navigate in the final section of this deep dive.
The ultimate objective of processing trauma cannot simply be survival or avoidance. It has to be the reclamation of your identity.
The sources argue passionately against accepting the limitations of living hurt.
The insidious nature of severe trauma is its tendency to become an identity.
Even after you have processed the fact and you're actively managing the impact, the event still threatens to define your parameters.
If your primary lens for viewing the world is through the specific lens of your injury, you are essentially allowing the initial event to continuously re-traumatize you.
You restrict your geography, you restrict your relationships, you avoid experiences just to avoid potential triggers.
You allow an unhealed person to dictate the square footage of your world.
To combat this, the text suggests a vital cognitive shift regarding how we view the people who have harmed us.
Instead of categorizing them purely as bad people, which honestly makes the act of forgiveness feel like a defeat,
It suggests viewing them as unhealed people.
there's an old psychological adage, hurt people hurt people.
When an individual carries a massive unaddressed wound, their primary mode of interaction often becomes projecting that pain onto others to alleviate their own internal pressure.
Categorizing an offender as unhealed does not absolve them of responsibility,
And it certainly does not minimize the damage they caused.
but it fundamentally alters your relationship to the offense. It allows you to depersonalize the cruelty.
You realize that their betrayal was a symptom of their internal brokenness, not an accurate reflection of your inherent value.
And once you detach your worth from their actions, you can begin the active phase of what the source calls committing rebellious acts of resilience.
I love that phrase. The nomenclature there is highly intentional. Rebellious implies a conscious, defiant insurgency against the gravitational pull of your own trauma.
A rebellious act of resilience begins with an audit of your own internal vocabulary.
It's the practice of catching yourself when you utilize phrases like, I can't, or I don't, and interrogating whether those limitations are genuine or simply artifacts of past pain.
The speaker provides two deeply relatable case studies from her own life to illustrate this rebellion.
The first is what we can call the ice maker incident. She is on a vacation with friends, staying in a rental house at the beach.
And she discovers that the standalone ice maker in the kitchen is broken.
The psychological cascade that follows is completely disproportionate to the mechanical failure of a kitchen appliance.
Her internal narrative immediately spirals back to the core trauma of her divorce.
Her logic path goes like this. This is yet another thing he has taken from me. If he had been faithful, we would still be married. If we were married, he would be here right now to fix this machine. But he isn't, therefore I am fundamentally incapable of having ice.
She is running the deep, grooved tape of victimhood. She is allowing a past betrayal to actively ruin a present moment of leisure.
But the intervention occurs when she observes her own spiral. She recognizes that she is artificially shrinking her capability based on her trauma.
So she deploys a rebellious question against her own limitation. What if I could?
What if the narrative of helplessness is false?
She takes out her phone. She searches for a YouTube tutorial on how to repair that specific model of ice maker.
She tinkers with the mechanisms and she actually fixes it.
When the first piece of ice drops into the bin, she says she did the MC Hammer dance around the kitchen.
It's a highly comedic image, but the psychological victory is massive. Fixing an appliance did not erase the grief of her divorce.
But it empirically proved to her nervous system that she was not helpless.
She did not have to remain a passive victim of her circumstances.
The second case study amplifies this concept even further. It's the boogie board narrative.
She is at the beach, and her friends invite her to play in the ocean. Her immediate response is a rigid deployment of defenses.
She immediately lists all the potential threats. I do not do oceans. The ocean contains sharks. The sand has hidden shells that will lacerate your feet. There are jellyfish that will sting you.
The metaphor here is brilliantly transparent. The ocean is unpredictable, it's vast, and it contains hidden dangers that can cause sudden pain.
Just like human relationships, new experiences are equally unpredictable and dangerous.
It is infinitely safer to remain in a stationary chair on the dry sand, just observing life rather than participating in it, because participating means risking another injury.
But her friend, refusing to accept this limitation, leaves a boogie board resting against her chair and runs into the water.
The speaker remains on the sand, repeating her defensive mantra of, I don't do oceans, while watching her friend experience genuine joy.
The turning point is her decision to challenge the fear of being stung or cut. She recognizes that avoiding the potential for pain is simultaneously guaranteeing the absence of joy.
So she commits the rebellious act. She grabs the board and runs into the surf.
Now, the narrative does not offer a sanitized cinematic ending where she gracefully rides the wave to shore.
No, it's brutally honest. She gets completely obliterated by a wave.
It pulls her under, the board hits her, her swimsuit is compromised.
Yeah,
It is the exact manifestation of the chaos she was trying to avoid.
she got knocked down.
But the critical data point is her reaction to the chaos. When she surfaces and recovers her footing, her response is not a trauma response.
It's laughter. She experiences genuine, uninhibited play.
For a brief window, she is not defined by the heavy, suffocating parameters of a devastated marriage. She is simply a person experiencing the ocean.
The wave knocked her down, but it also shattered the rigid, self-protective identity of living in pain that she had constructed.
It perfectly encapsulates the thesis of resilience. A rebellious act of resilience is the conscious decision that the individual who fractured your life does not get to permanently dictate your joy.
It's the choice to run into the unpredictable ocean, fully aware that the waves might crush you, because the potential for laughter outweighs the safety of the sand.
If we synthesize the vast psychological territory these sources have covered today, we see a highly structured progression of healing.
We began by validating the intelligence of the body, recognizing that somatic distress is a survival mechanism, not a moral failing.
We deconstructed the dangerous cultural myth that the internal act of forgiveness automatically necessitates the external restoration of closeness.
We mapped the divergent timelines, acknowledging that while the cognitive release of a debt can be immediate, the architecture of trust is rebuilt excruciatingly slowly, spoonful by spoonful, through observable changes in behavior.
We analyzed the critical framework of separating the fact of the trauma from its ongoing impact.
And that separation allowed us to reconceptualize triggers. We moved from viewing them as shameful failures of forgiveness to understanding them as merciful titrated leaks.
The nervous system's brilliant method of pacing your processing so the pain remains survivable.
We examined the daily economics of our 1,440 minutes, recognizing that rumination and unattended anger act as a predatory poison within our own biology.
We explored the tactical deployment of pre-forgiveness to shield ourselves from minor thefts of our time.
And finally, we looked at the necessity of rebellious acts of resilience to prevent our trauma from becoming our permanent identity.
The ultimate synthesis of these materials suggests that forgiveness is fundamentally a provision for the victim's own psychological liberation.
You do not have to generate it through sheer willpower.
You can conceptualize it as a mechanism that flows through you, aided by the understanding that those who inflict pain are often acting out of their own profound, unhealed spaces.
And you can execute all of this while fiercely maintaining the boundaries that protect your peace. Because in many scenarios, the healthiest way to love and forgive someone is to do so from a very safe distance.
It is entirely about reclaiming the territory of your own life. As we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with a specific, lingering question to analyze in your own context.
Review your own 1,440 minutes today.
Look at the defensive walls you have constructed. If trust truly requires the patience of a spoonful, and if your triggers are simply manageable leaks indicating where more care is needed,
What is one specific, tiny, rebellious act of resilience you can execute today?
what is one space, one hobby, or one moment of joy you can reclaim that you previously assumed was permanently closed off by someone else's actions?